Hey Jealous, and I am on the Austin City Council. I love that Progress Texas is always ready to stick it to the man. You got to keep fighting. No one's going to fight it for you. And as tired as you are, as stressed out as you are, take a breath and keep on going.
It's Friday, January 10th, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. So what's going to happen to TikTok? Well, let me start here by saying that as an occasionally cranky Gen X dad up until recently, I thought of TikTok as largely a pretty dumb waste of time. My son has turned me on to a couple of TikTok accounts that were quite funny, but also exceedingly dumb. So to this day, I wouldn't say I spend a ton of time browsing it. In recent months, though, Progress Texas has established a surprisingly strong presence on TikTok, which tells me a couple of things. First, there's an audience there for what we're trying to get across. And second, at the moment anyway, the platform's algorithms aren't going out of their way to limit our reach. Another thing I find on TikTok when I do spend a bit of time, and let me pause to reiterate that a lot of it is still really pretty mindless, there's a freedom of expression present, along with a growing sense that the external pressures and critiques of TikTok are increasingly perceived as an effort to silence that freedom of expression. Is TikTok a Chinese security threat or an insidious mind control experiment? I have no idea, but as Elon Musk's Twitter and now Mark Zuckerberg's vast Meta holdings, including Instagram, Facebook, and Threads, seemingly fall in line with the coming change in management, shall we say, I can't help but view this new lawsuit from Ken Paxton against TikTok with some degree of skepticism. Nolan D. McCaskill at the Dallas Morning News says Paxton is accusing the platform's management of deceptive marketing and that deception lies in the idea that TikTok is actually dangerous and addictive to minors and that it, quote, downplays the frequency of its inappropriate content by marking categories such as sexual content, nudity, profanity, or crude humor as infrequent and mild, unquote. Paxton claims that state investigators have found a large amount of extreme and mature content freely available to TikTok users as young as 13 and in fact supplied to young users without their having searched for it. This is the Texas AG's second lawsuit against TikTok, going after them back in October, alleging that they've been violating a state parental consent law by collecting, storing, and processing the personal identifying information of minors. Aiden Runnels at the Texas Tribune elaborates that depending on a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, TikTok may not be accessible to anyone in the country for much longer anyway. TikTok says they'll pull all activity from the U.S. on January 19th if the U.S. Supreme Court upholds a new federal law mandating that TikTok's Chinese parent company, ByteDance, sell the platform. SCOTUS is set to hear arguments on all this today, and back here in Texas in the upcoming legislative session, several bills have been filed on the matter as well, one of which would forbid minors from creating accounts on any social media site altogether. What's evident for sure is a wide-ranging effort for Republican-led government to seize control of digital content in America, with legacy media, independent media, and social media all coming under fire in recent weeks. Donald Trump takes office in 10 days, and the limits on what he might do once in office are not especially robust. Any resistance to Trump from Congress appears very unlikely to enjoy any help from either of Texas's U.S. senators. Matthew Choi at the Texas Tribune writes that both John Cornyn and Ted Cruz have signaled support for all of Trump's picks for cabinet positions, including the most outright loony ones, and both are actively pressing their colleagues in the Senate not to slow down the confirmation process. This includes Robert F. Kennedy Jr., renowned vaccine skeptic who, just as the first human deaths from H1N1 bird flu emerged, looks likely to become Secretary of Health and Human Services. Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, strangely culty to start with, but also known to be chummy with both Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and recently ousted Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, appears on her way to a job leading our country's intelligence apparatus. Wild-eyed ideologue Kash Patel to head up the FBI, and apparent neo-Nazi and Fox News host Pete Hegseth to run the Defense Department, despite widespread allegations of alcoholism and sexual misconduct. Both Ted Cruz and John Cornyn have pledged to greenlight them all. Cruz is also bullish on Trump's desire to somehow acquire Greenland from Denmark. On his podcast this week, Cruz blew right past the inconvenient facts that Scandinavian people have occupied Greenland for far longer than the U.S. has even been around, and that Denmark is a long-standing and steadfast ally of the United States. Cruise instead is focused on the valuable natural resources present on that landmass, as well as Greenland's increasingly valuable strategic location, as the global warming that Cruise and his party have denied even exists melts Arctic ice, providing potential new shipping lanes, as well as a valuable strategic site considering increasing tensions with both Russia and China. I know we're not supposed to invoke the Nazis, but right out of the chute in the 1930s, Adolf Hitler decided that Germany would be a more suitable boss for German-speaking territories in Austria and Czechoslovakia, so he just up and took them. And we all know where things went from there. Again, back to Texas, where an op-ed on new plans being worked up between Republican Governor Greg Abbott and Democratic Houston Mayor John Whitmire to sell Houston's water to parched West Texas reminds us of the terrible job Texas has done historically in preserving this existential resource. Chris Tomlinson recalls that our state's groundwater laws allow property owners virtual autonomy in how much water they draw from their wells, even if that demand dries up the wells and springs on neighboring properties. We do not have a strong track record at all when it comes to managing and preserving water in Texas. Tomlinson writes, quote, "Providing more water is like adding lanes to a highway. Once West Texas businesses rely on East Texas water, politicians will find it impossible to turn off the tap. The Houston region, meanwhile, doesn't have as much excess water as West Texans want. Abbott wants to rob Peter to pay Paul, and Whitmire needs to nip this lousy deal in the bud and let West Texans sort themselves out. Buckle up, because the old Texas aphorism still applies. Whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting," unquote. Our funding here at Progress Texas is rarely sufficient for us to plan much more than a quarter or two ahead, but the conservative disinformation machine that we oppose has no such obstacle. They're funded by oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups and more. Our regular everyday listeners, just like you, form the backbone of our funding here at Progress Texas. We could use your support as a monthly contributor. No amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate and get signed up. Thanks to Steve Williams, Leslie O'Laughlin, Jacqueline Stewart, and Erica Solis, all of whom have done exactly that lately. We appreciate all of y'all. Make sure and hit the web store, too, at progresstexas.org. You're going to find Y'all Means All, Revolution, and our most popular Humans Against Ted Cruz t-shirts, all union printed right here in Texas, and lots more, all at progresstexas.org. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Friday, January 10th, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again on Monday.